For Ohio State, the season is still about what it was about back in August. It has always been, and it will always be about the game. Michigan comes to town in just about, a little under 2 weeks now. Had a great win last week, this past Saturday against Indiana. Throttled them, took care of business, got Maryland this week on the road. Open is 27.5-point favorites. There's some stuff about Maryland that I think could be, at least intriguing for Ohio State to play against, but we're ramping up for Michigan if we're Ohio State, right? Like the same thing is true as it was in August, as it is today. Let's talk about that because this ramp-up period is a little bit interesting for both Michigan and Ohio State. The data points that you have are a little bit tricky because, you play who you play, right? You can only control so much about the scheduling piece. Played a Notre Dame team in the first game that Ohio State took care of business. They were a top 5 team, then was Notre Dame, and they've trended down since then. Not been bad, but I'm just saying that data point is tricky to gauge. Okay, well, how good is Notre Dame really? We're starting to get more and more of that story. The rest of Big Ten play. You played a good Penn State team, took care of business there, and then the other games, you're like, well, we did what we had to do. We continue to win. We continue to look relatively dominant outside of a couple, fluky games. I don't know if fluky is the right word, but you played Northwestern in just egregious weather. It is what it is, right? And so what I want to focus on for this segment is the ramp up to Michigan. What are some things that I would like to see from this program, from the game that will happen this Saturday, from the weekend practice, before you play Michigan? What do we want to see? The first thing that I would like to see from this Ohio State program is developing a counterpunch in the pass game. And it sounds funny to say because you have so much talent in that wide receiver room. A ton of guys that are going to play on Sundays in the very near future. Emeka Egbuka, absolute savage. Julian Fleming, he's a dog. But Marvin Harrison Jr. has been getting the lion's share of receptions, and for good reason. He's your best receiver. More often than not, he's going to be the best player on either side of the ball on the field. Just kind of the way this thing works. Let's look at the numbers here. C.J. Stroud has fed Marvin Harrison Jr. for good reason. Against Indiana, C.J. Stroud had 17 completions. Marvin Harrison Jr. had 7 catches. Northwestern, 10 completions, 5 catches for Harrison. 26 completions against Penn State, 10 catches. We keep going down the list here. The fact of the matter is, the pass game right now is leaning really heavily on Marvin Harrison Jr. to do a lot of the work. And this is a difficult point to attack, but we're going to do our best. He's your best player, so he should get a lot of catches. But my concern is what happens when a program like Michigan, who has arguably the best pass defense in the country, giving up 160 yards per game right now, with similar data points as Ohio State has from the schedule. What happens if they just say, you know what? We're going to put 2 guys on Marvin Harrison Jr. You know what? If we lose today, it won't be because number 18 had a field day. If you beat us with somebody else, that's fine. We'll live that way. But Marvin Harrison Jr., you're not going to be the reason why we take an L today. I want to see Ohio State develop that left hook. You've got the right jab. You've thrown quite a few knockouts with it. You've been really effective. A lot of those plays have gone to Marvin Harrison Jr., but when they take him away, which win is maybe the wrong word. If they take him away, are you able to have somebody else seamlessly step into that spotlight and make something happen? Because Jackson Smith-Njigba has been a little bit dinged up throughout the course of the year. You hope he's back for the game. You hope he's able to contribute. And if he is, you got problems for everybody else in the country if he's back sooner rather than later. But the fact of the matter remains, having a really solid number 2 receiver for you, I just want to see them step up and show that they can be that number 1 guy if they have to be for 2.5, 3 quarters. I don't think that's asking too much because they've got the firepower to do it. But I'd like to see them continue to refine that before they get into that matchup against Michigan. Second thing that I'd like to see, the running back depth is obviously going to be a point of conversation going forward. Mayan Williams got dinged up. Doesn't sound like it's super serious, but got hurt from a lower extremity perspective against Indiana. Travion Henderson watched the Indiana game in a boot. You hope both those guys can get back healthy as soon as possible. I personally would expect we have at least one of those guys back for the Michigan game, if not both. I don't have any insight on that, just my feel. The point I want to make is if you're Dallin Hayden, the freshman running back, you want to feel as empowered as possible as you ramp up to the Michigan game. If I'm the Ohio State staff, I put as much as possible on young Hayden's plate as I can in this week against Maryland. Because with the way this running back room is looking, even if, they are healthy for that Michigan game, what percent are they at? What version are they? What percent of Mine Williams are we getting against Michigan? What percent of Travion Henderson are we getting against Michigan? The point I want to make is you probably need, at some capacity, Dallin Hayden to contribute for you in that game. And if you put a ton on his plate this week against Maryland, then you can trust him with a reduced version of that against Michigan. Because you're going to need him to do something in that game. The more and more we look at this, it just feels like you're going to need some kind of contribution from the freshman, which is asking a lot. I mean, don't get it twisted. He's a very talented player. The game against Michigan will be very bright lights. And to give him a heavy workload this coming week would assist you in avoiding that kind of deer in the headlights scenario. And Hayden played really well against Indiana. Had almost 20 carries, over 100 yards, is a dog. Keep feeding him. Keep getting him up to speed. Empower him to contribute on the biggest stage, which will be here, like I said, in less than 2 weeks. Going to be crucial. It's a team game. Running back room is continuing to be a point of emphasis as they get healthy and they ask more guys to contribute throughout the duration of the season. Last thing I'm looking at as we ramp up to this Michigan game. The good news for me, if I'm an Ohio State fan, is I still feel like Ohio State's best game is out there somewhere. And you got 2 games left. So that means it's either the Maryland game, the Michigan game, somewhere in the playoff. Heck, maybe the national title game, right? I mean, that's not unrealistic for Ohio State. But the fact that the best game is still out there, if I'm Ohio State, let's just leave with no new problems from the Maryland game. Like, you watch the Summer Olympics every 4 years, and you see these athletes before the final heat, before that, medal race. They have these preliminary races, I suppose you say, and you see them get out of the blocks fast. They're running, but then they're cruising. They don't, they don't leave that race with muscle soreness or having pulled a muscle. You hear what I'm saying here. If you're Ohio State, take care of business against Maryland. You cannot afford to have any sort of letdown. Do not misunderstand what I'm saying here. As a program, I want to feel as teed up as possible for the big one in Columbus, the one after Maryland. Like, that's what, you can tell how juiced I am. That's what's going to make the difference for your season. That is what has been and will always be the point of emphasis for Ohio State, is playing and doing your best to beat Michigan. Not doing your best, beating Michigan. That's what it's about if you're a Buckeye fan. And so for the Maryland game, I want to make sure this engine, this whole operation, this car is as revved up and as fine-tuned as possible. If we got questions about a certain pass concept, let's get them answered against Maryland. Let's figure it out. Hey, can we run that effectively in this game against X, Y, and Z defense? Let's test it out. So still handle business, but at the end of the day, the best game's still out there. Turn up the internal heat, turn up the internal pressure, have Ohio State have their best game to the standard leading into this Michigan game. All right, have everything buttoned up. That's what you're hoping for this week as a 27.5-point favorite against Maryland. You don't want to leave with new questions, with new problems that need to be addressed before the biggest game of your regular season. All right, going to be a whole lot of fun. Develop the counterpunch in the pass game. Get the running back room teed up and ready to roll. Get Dallin Hayden feeling confident and comfortable. And then lastly, just have the whole operation fine-tuned and ready to roll. I'm JD Pickell. This has been The Hard Count. We appreciate you tuning in with us. If you haven't already joined the party, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you. Nick Brake does the real heavy lifting. You help drive this whole thing by contributing and commenting, and most importantly, subscribing. So we're going to keep the party rolling, and we will see y'all next time. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.